Um, Good morning, or evening, or good afternoon, depending on where in the world they're joining us from. Um, my name is Jenny Cafiso, and I'm the Executive Director of Canadian Jesuits International. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, Cobalt Blues, a conversation on the politics of resource extraction and education in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But also we will hear from one of our partners in Honduras who will help us see these same global phenomena we will be discussing and which we need to address in different parts of the world. I see people joining us. We have 220 people who have registered, and I can see the numbers rising of people joining us. And I'm very happy that we are co-sponsoring this event with the Mauro Institute for Peace and Justice at St. Paul's College. And I would like to introduce Jason Brennan, who is the operations manager at the Arthur Mauro Institute for Peace and Justice, and who is he has an audience. He has an in-person audience with him just now. Jason.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny, and welcome all of you to the Mauro Institute for Peace and Justice at St. Paul's College in Winnipeg. So we're coming from Toronto, Winnipeg, and we're hearing from speakers all around the room. We have a nice room in here. I'm just going to give you a little logistics. Today we'll be hearing, of course, from panelists, and then as the panelists finish their discussions, Jenny and I and Peter Niermeyer in Toronto will handle a Q&A session as best we can. So there's quite a few people online. The thing we're going to ask you to do is type in your questions into the Q&A box, and then we will read from those questions as best we can to get to as many questions as we can. So the Q&A box is the key thing to use, and that's the logistics of it. And there, in a moment, I'll introduce one of our panelists.
First of all, before we go on, even though we're all in different locations, and we literally are in different locations, Jason and I are in two different cities in Canada, but our speakers are also in different cities and different continents. But I also know that many of the participants are from different continents around the world joining us. But it is a practice in Canada that in recognition of the presence of Indigenous people in the past and present, and the need for ongoing work for Indigenous justice, we do a land acknowledgement. And so we acknowledge, we're going to use the, because I'm based in Toronto, I will use the land acknowledgement from Toronto, but I invite people to put in the chat their own land acknowledgement if you like. So we acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, is now home of many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And as I said, please feel free to put in the chat your own tradition or the traditional territories you're joining us from. And I hand it over to Jason.
Great. I just had one little bit of logistics just to let everyone know this is being recorded and will be published on the Mauro Institute YouTube channel in a couple of days. We'll get it up for those that want to go back or share it with others. And so now I have the privilege of introducing one of our two presenters. They're going to co-present today. So I will start with an introduction of Dr. Evelyn Mayanja. It's my pleasure to do this. She is an interdisciplinary scholar, passionate about global peace and security, with focus on Africa's natural resource-rich nations. Dr. Mayanja will speak on the intersection of girls' education and resource extraction within the Democratic Republic of Congo context. On a personal note, I will just add that I've known Evelyn since she was a student here at the Mauro Institute at the University of Manitoba, PhD student. And I remember the first time I met her at a student conference, and prior to the conference, she was a person who kind of always had her head down, always in work, but I didn't really get a sense of who she was until that conference. And she spoke with passion and knowledge and wisdom and experience, all of these things that Dr. Evelyn has. I'm sure she'll be sharing. You'll witness that today. In addition, of course, she comes with a great care and compassion for people, something familiar for the Jesuit context, the cura personalis. And so when I think of Dr. Evelyn, I think of all of these things. And so we look forward to hearing from you today, Dr. Evelyn.
And I think I understand that Dr. Evelyn and Father Toussaint are going to share a presentation. And so perhaps I should introduce both of them at the same time. So I also have the pleasure of introducing Father Toussaint Kaparhire Murhula, who is the director of the Arupa Center for Research and Training in Lubumbashi in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he is joining us from the Democratic Republic of Congo today. Father Toussaint is a Jesuit priest who received his PhD in global politics and international relations at Loyola University, Chicago. His research interests include social justice, democracy, and peace. He has taught at universities in US, Hungary, Kenya, and in Kinshasa. One of the Arupa Center's main objectives is to raise awareness and address the social, economic, and environmental injustices created by irresponsible mining practices at Lubumbashi. And we're very happy to have him as a partner of CJI, and we have worked and collaborated in a number of initiatives. So I'm very pleased to have Father with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish to welcome everyone who is here. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. And as Jenny mentioned, we'll be co-presenting with Father Toussaint. And the topic that we are addressing today is the politics of resource extraction and education. I wish that we start briefly by introducing our Congo, the country that we love so much. For many people, Congo is known as a land of conflicts, resource extraction, and those who have studied history, we know it as the Congo Free State that was extracted by King Leopold from Belgium, and after that, the Belgian colonizers came in. And of course, we have never experienced good political leadership. And that is really the baggage that we carry from the beginning when we are addressing this topic. However, that does not really mean that we have only pain and struggles. There's a lot of beauty. There's a lot of resilience. For example, we have the Inga Dam, which can provide energy to the entire African continent. The beauty of the Congolese people. We laugh, we smile, we dance, we sing. That in spite of the pain and the struggles at times, we give humanity and empower each other.
So thank you very much, Evelyn, for that wonderful presentation. I would like also to greet everybody in the room and welcome them. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your care and your attention. Indeed, as Evelyn said it, and I was actually going to jump in and say, every time Congo is spoken of in the international news, international media, people talk a lot about the minerals, the mines, the killings, the death, you know. Congo is not only about that. Sometimes even you have very, willing omissions of referring to Congo as a country with more than 100 million people living in the Congo and going about their everyday life like everybody else. Just to say that we may need to get it right from the beginning that the Congo is not only whatever sometimes the media portray as, war and killings and rapes and, dying under the ground because people are going for minerals. Congo indeed has an amazing, population, youthful population, very young. More than 60% of the Congolese population is younger, less than 25 years old. So you understand the potential that this population can have if it gets well educated and led into developing the potentials and the talents that they do have. Evelyn has mentioned it also. I think when you get to the Congo, you may be just impressed and by the breathtaking landscapes, lakes, mountains, green. Unfortunately, all of this might be under threat because many of the multinational companies that come to the Congo, they tend to forget really that we do have some responsibilities, not only to the present generation in terms of generating income and money and creating jobs, because of the framework that we have set up, the kind of neoliberal approach to making profit here and now, and forgetting that we really owe a responsibility to the future generations. And I was very, very much impressed when Jenny started talking, and she mentioned this Canadian, duty or obligation to just make the land acknowledgement. I felt like we may need something of this nature in the Congo to recognize that the land we are, exploiting and, violating to some extent has also belonged to communities of people that need to be honored, to be respected. And oftentimes when I am in a live, talk, I like to invite people just to take a minute of silence to acknowledge the many millions of lives that have been sacrificed for the sake of coltan, of diamond, of cobalt, of gold, because sometimes we tend to get things wrong and to believe that all of these stones, despite whichever values we may bestow on them, have more value than a human life. That's not the case. And that is why in this conversation, we try to push for really a socially, ethical, orientation in everything we do. Thank you.
And the issues that we are going to discuss, let's start from where maybe we would have concluded. That we are going to look at issues of governance, which are rooted in that colonial extraction that set Congo on a very wrong foot. We'll also look into issues of capitalist greed and the dehumanization that goes with that. And that brings us also into issues of racism, because many times when I talk with the Father to say and so many others, we ask ourselves, for example, if this extraction was going on in Canada or in the US, would the world have been silent? And we also, for all of us who are here, we also bring in the issues of consumerism. And I always ask myself that probably the nature is telling us that enough is enough. I cannot sustain you anymore. And when we have too much, like here at the university where I am, or when I go to high schools, I always ask students, think of the many students, think of the many children who are languishing in their minds and do not have the possibility of being in the classroom. So then from the beginning, we would like to invite you to really be part of us. See yourself in this picture. And we'll share a few slides just to anchor what we are talking about. And we also always, when we give these talks, we'd rather to say, we also wish to invite you to know that we are talking about people, human beings who have dreams, who have passion, but the global society, the norms we make, and so many other issues have dehumanized them and continuously plundered the resources that would have enabled them to be in school and to live better lives. You are able to see our screen. Let's start from this one. When we talk about the politics of mining, we decided that we'll look at a number of levels. The local level, of course, where people have been displaced, and we'll say more about that. But also the international level, that for a long time has facilitated this exploitation. Over here, we just give an example of a mining company. And over here, we have huge. Here we are talking about 288 mountains or hills, more than, I think, 2,000 hectares of land that have been fenced off. And all these places were inhabited by populations, children who used to go to school, mothers who used to cultivate. Human life displaced. All of these fences mean that people cannot go in, which means they cannot continue cultivating. They cannot access water. Even schools and hospitals, which happen to be in these places, most of the time end up being demolished. And I think it is important to know that whenever we talk about copper, cobalt, lithium, nickel, gold, diamonds, I think most of them are consumed by us in the global north. And that's where we started by underlining the element of consumerism, that maybe we have taken so much, especially from Congo, where, for example, Congo has more than 70% of global copper and cobalt, and so many other minerals. But for how long are we going to consume when people are completely sacrificed?
I should want to add a couple of words on what Dr. Evelyn has just mentioned. I think the situation that we're going to be discussing with you today is not something actually that comes from a spontaneous generation. It is not something that has fallen out from the blue sky. It is something that has a history. And every time we face a social reality, it is always very important for us to understand the history of the present, the history that lies behind that. Watching the fence and the land that has been privatized, it should be emphasized that it is a land that belonged to communities, to people, but the land, because of the discovery of some important minerals, and we know that nowadays we are in this rush, really, for what is left in terms of natural resources, especially what we are calling today the strategic minerals, because of the high-tech industry, the cell phones, the batteries, the electric cars, and so on and so forth, which are changing our ways of relating to life, to the world, to the environment altogether. But I wanted to emphasize the thing that it is a sad situation in which the land is being snatched away from the people, the communities. Evelyn mentioned that communities are getting displaced. That is very, very true, and we're living it on a daily basis. We see it, and it is painful because most of our identities actually are bound to the way we relate to the land. I want maybe to also mention the fact that in history, political history of the Congo, the place has really been represented or framed. I wanted to even say almost as a no man's land. It means forget about the people and the population that inhabited those spaces and just come and grab everything else. You all know that the phases of state formation in the West, in Europe, in North America and other places, it was really the kind of coming together to create institutions that can protect the lives and the dignity of the citizens. Most of African nations or states, institutions, came rather as ways of protecting the interests of those powerful international actors, multinationals that were coming to look for resources. And it is unfortunate that within the 60 plus years of independence, despite the struggles and the fighting of local communities and people, oftentimes we have failed to change, to reverse that trend in which the state institutions sometimes tend to protect the interests of the international community more than they do the interests and the dignity of the local community. So Dr. Evelyn was saying that we're going to be talking from three perspectives or three levels of analysis. The local, which is really listening to the stories and narratives of those people experiencing on a daily basis this kind of sufferings, of contradictions, of exclusion, of getting trampled upon because of the higher interest. At the second level is the national level, where we are fighting to get policies that are right and implemented to protect what we call also the national interest. But the third level of analysis, or from where we shall be talking, is this international and global network, okay? This international competition for access to resources that are completely overlooking some of the ethical, obligations that we do have vis-a-vis the environment, vis-a-vis the communities, vis-a-vis the cultures of people that are getting erased in the process.
And at all those three levels, there's the politics that we need to unravel. I don't know whether time will allow us, but it is kind of complex. And when mining is happening, for example, here, we have all these trucks coming to for the residues or the tailings. And sometimes you find women, children, boys, etc. They're all here trying to scavenge for copper and cobalt. With this environment, they cannot go to school. They have no money. They cannot cut. They don't eat well most of the time. And it is not surprising that sometimes we meet people and they feel heartbroken because they ask, the whole day I've not eaten. Of course, they have no land to cultivate. And over here, this is close to Lubumbashi, where Father Tusa is a mining tailing. Again, here land has been destroyed. And we have also to remember that whenever we have these tailings, they are toxic. Yet you find most of the time children are playing around here. And some of the parents used to be artisanal miners, but when mining companies come in and take over the portions or the lands that were local people used to cultivate and to mine, of course, they have no money to send children to school. But I want here to underline the issue of environmental degradation and how it has multidimensional effects on people's lives and even education. It is difficult to imagine that someone could come from this environment and go to school and concentrate. There's a study that has been done in Zambia where they find that children who have been exposed to toxins, for example, lead, even their memories shrink. And so they cannot follow, even when they're seated in the classroom. They cannot remember. And of course, that shrinking of the memory does not stop at childhood. It accompanies them all through life. There's another study that is being done that then how does that exposure to minerals will also lead to dementia, yet we are living in an environment where at home we cannot afford living with millions and millions of people with dementia, yet we don't have even effective hospitals. So the situation is kind of dire. And so then you find that the children who would have gone to school, most of the time, they are here looking for survival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Evelyn, I wanted to actually to ask you to pass to the next slide, but before doing so, I would just add very quickly illustrative of the kind of realities that we do have. And this is the kind of landscape that we might be leaving behind us. And it is really, really sad to see that, in Africa, in most parts, of African countries where multinational companies are doing such business, they may finish, the business, once the mining sites are exhausted and depleted, and they may just pack and leave, the environment the way you look at on your screen. I am saying this because I am just returning from a trip to Montana in the US, where the Black Beauty copper, company actually trying to conduct business is obligated to leave the space or the mining site at its pristine, states, so that the community around can continue to enjoy a green, environment with, parks, with, landscape that are just as natural as, forest and whatever. So it is the moral obligation of these companies not to just abandon, the open pits, pollute maybe our soil, pollute maybe the water that we are drinking from, or even the fishery, in the rivers, and just move back to China, or move back to the US, or move back to Canada, forgetting that this interference with the environment is not only sinful, it is really unacceptable.
And here are some of the children that we have met in the mines. Boys, girls, and over here, majority were girls. And we asked them, would you like to go to school? Many of them, they said yes, and others, I can't, because I have to feed my family, I have to care for my parents. And even when I go to school, I will not have scholastic materials. And I asked them, so how much do you earn when you work in these mines? Of course, it depends on what they're able to get every day. But mining is not easy, because they stand in this water over here, which contains numerous toxins. Most of them are also exposed to sexual violence. And for the few who said that they are going to school, even the teachers do not understand the environment in which these children come from, or they are so busy that they want to earn a living instead of taking care of these children. And so then you find that in such an environment, education is not a luxury. Sometimes they go to school in the morning, and in the afternoon come home and work in the mines. But we also need to understand which kind of education do they receive. Due to colonial exploitation and the conditioning and the cultural destruction, you find that in Congo and so many other African countries, they still follow that colonial education curriculums and the systems and the syllabuses, which do not really empower them to address the challenges that they face on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And if they earn here $2 or $1 a day, they find that to be more valuable than education. Because one girl here was asking me, okay, I go to school, and after that, what do? I have a teacher who said that he went to the University of Lubumbashi, but he always comes to school with only one shirt. So what is the purpose of that education? Yet here I earn some money. So you find that even the value of education is most of the time misunderstood. And of course, which kind of education? I want to underline that point. Because if we go back to the definitions of education, it is to transform people's lives. But due to the politics at the national level and local level, especially, that education has failed to transform people's lives. So we cannot talk about education when it remains colonial. And at the same time, you find that while the education system remains colonial, the structures, the institutions, starting with mining, they also remain focused on colonial extraction and exploitation, especially of Black people. And so that's why at the beginning we mentioned that whenever we talk about what is going on in Congo, we need also to bring in the issues of race and that colonial baggage that has never been addressed. And when we're in this mine, some of us were from, we had someone from Germany, they were saying, how can people parade? Africa has not changed. I think those discourses are misleading most of the time. Because, for example, one of the trucks I showed you, if it is packed with minerals and that soil that contained the minerals, it costs $700,000. And the ones we stood, for that to say, remember, where CAF is, there's a connection, sometimes you see trucks passing, and after that, there is also a connection that, a road that connects Congo to Zambia and South Africa, etc. And we counted the trucks that pass on a daily basis. They're in hundreds. So then you multiply $700,000, just say by 100 trucks. How much money could that have been to enable all these children to be in the classroom?
To chip in a little bit more of what Evelyn has just shared about, I would like us to make sure when we talk about artisanal mining, we all understand what we're talking about. The people you see in the photos actually are like scavengers. So everyone trying to get whatever has been left out from the industrial mining. So this site, most of the time, are sites that have been abandoned. Part of the work we do at the Centre Rupe in Lubumbashi is to help organize these communities into cooperatives so that we can increase the bargaining leverage in terms of selling their products or just improving their livelihoods. You do have many sites, mining sites, Fungurume or Kapata or Kolwezi or even here in Lubumbashi, where we are trying actually to bring some of these artisanal miners into cooperatives, because even when they try to organize and come together to say we can sell part of our products, our production, daily production, they would still do it to Chinese, dealers on site. Chinese dealers would not verify what is the content, la teneur, okay, of these minerals, and they would just pay the miners as low as possible because that is the law of the market or capitalism. And so until these artisanal miners begin to understand that they can come together and like every other cooperatives, bring the rule of the game to serve their interest and advantage, they will continue to be enslaved, exploited, and live in these conditions that these pictures can be, portraying here. Evelyn, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. Okay. What I wanted to say maybe from here is simply the amount, the level of exposure to pollution that most of the artisanal miners are exposed to. In many sites, actually, you can get as many as 10,000, 15,000, artisanal miners working on a site with no protection whatsoever. Of course, the Congolese government has been trying to accompany and provide at least some framework within which artisanal miners can work. But it should be also emphasized here, as we said previously, that having even access to a site where you still have good minerals is a bit of a struggle for these miners. Many of them are fenced out, excluded, and they have to fight their way to get mining sites that still have some content that can allow them to get some good material and be able to sell it. But Evelyn was saying that we do have trucks and trucks and trucks and trucks all through the day, siphoning or taking out these minerals, including the ones that have been produced by artisanal miners and industrial mining. What I want to bring to your attention now is the whole, we mentioned the international level of analysis where there is a huge competition between China and Western companies. And now there is the Lobito corridor that is being discussed and built. Washington, D.C., that has been somehow out, for some time from exploiting the minerals in the Congo for some historical reason and details that I may, spare you from at this point. But we know that the U.S. and Washington is coming back through this Lobito Corridor project. And the Lobito Corridor project wants what? It simply wants to create like 1,300 kilometers of railroad going from Zambia, crossing the Congo, and going all the way to Lobito port. It is a seaport on the Atlantic Ocean in Angola, because, as you can tell, the kind of competition and conflict is between, I would call it, the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean seaports are taking minerals to Asia, China mostly, and the Atlantic Ocean, of course, is taking all these minerals to the West. And so you may understand why this Lobito Corridor project is almost a counterpart of what the Chinese, have tried to develop as the new Silk, Belt Silk Road, trying to entice African countries into selling their resources and taking the way of the East in exchange to developing infrastructures. Evelyn, back to you, please.
And these are some of the tracks that we are talking about. And over here, we continue to have children mining. And down here, as Palatus has been mentioning, then when artisanal miners collect whatever they manage, they sell them into what they call control houses. And most of the time, these control houses are owned by Chinese and not local people. And the prices that is paid for a sack of these minerals, which someone can collect for a week, is very, very little. I will not go into the details. Mm-hmm. And over here, we have a school. So even if we are talking about education, studying in this environment is not really conducive at all. Yet in this area, we know the name big for political, for security reasons, there are 5 mining companies. Yet there are no roads, no hospitals, and this is the school where children go on a daily basis. I don't think that even if I was the one, I would be motivated to come to such a classroom. But the question that we continuously ask ourselves is that what will happen to these children without education? Maybe Congo has been sacrificed for so long. And talking to some of the teachers who teach in this kind of schools, of course, they're not motivated. They're all talking about how much has been taken away, and they have remained with nothing. Mm-hmm. That even in one place we are the ones who provided them with chalk, they have no money. And this is where the local government comes in and the national government also comes in, that instead of investing in the children, in their education, that we are wondering, it will be difficult to give an answer with precision, where does the money go, but the money does not go back into communities. And we are struggling with how can we influence policies to ensure that monies go back and reinforce community development. For example, at the national level, Congo's mining code of 2018 has the cahier de charge, which is cahier de charge in Anglais. I don't remember, but the cahier de charge allocates a portion to developing local communities, but most of the time, money is not allocated. And so when we are thinking about education, let's keep in mind that these are the schools. And over here, they are putting up a new classroom. Do you have anything to say about this?
Well, simply, well, cahier de charge, I think it could be the scope statements. And here maybe we can mention also the fact that we do have all these multinational companies that with corporate social responsibilities, which means they have actually to take care of some of the social issues around. It is true that some of them claim they do pay actually the money to the government. And here it is maybe the place where we can call on our own local authorities, national authorities, because every time that contract mines are signed, it becomes an opportunity for politicians to get richer than to reinvest back into their own communities. So the level of corruption that is also part of this is seen in the way that many of our political leaders get richer and richer overnight, forgetting that communities need to be built, collective, and the common good actually needs to be served. Not to say that corruption is typical of these countries or these places, because I believe actually the whole global international system is already very corrupt. And it has been favoring to some extent that level of corruption. So we need to simply be aware that there is more we can do in terms of transparency, in terms of control, in terms of just giving back, accountability vis-a-vis the community and vis-a-vis the people, so that we can overcome some of these challenges, because it is unacceptable to have such a school, okay, in a country where most of the minerals are really going to enrich the rest of the world. So that's shameful, and everyone in a position of leadership should feel ashamed to accept that such conditions be offered to their children as a site of education.
And that brings us to the issue that we want to also underline, that whenever we look at these conditions, we have come up with a concept of just mining, that some of the profits have to be returned. And not only from this mining, sometimes we talk even about what has been taken away from Congo since the 1800s. I think that history has to be unraveled. And at the same time, even from our local leaders, that element of justice has to be always taken as a priority when they're signing mining agreements with companies. And we know that is going on. Children cannot afford even to go to school at home because of so much displacement. And of course, the extraction of the minerals, rain has become scarce, especially in the southern part of Congo. Mm-hmm. So people are really starving. Mm-hmm. And when mining companies destroy all water sources and the water tables, they built a tank here in the Luashi, yeah. And in the evening, you find that the water that people collect smells, yet they take it home and use it for cooking and for drinking. And over here, just to show you, over here, there was a river where mining companies are dumping all their assets, and the local community created a well here where they get water. But of course, scientifically, we know that the water table is all affected by acid. And that's where we want to underline the point of then, how can these children come from these environments? And many times they complain of sickness. In Congo, for the first time, we are experiencing more and more cases of cancer, which never existed before, and so many other complications. And so when we talk about education, there are so many obstacles that people have to face. If they cannot afford a decent meal a day, like this woman here, so Peter, you cannot see her hand. She was collecting cassava. In Congo, sometimes we eat cassava leaves, and they're very delicious. But those leaves were all full of dust. And at home, she said, you know what, I really do not have enough water even to wash the leaves. And when she was removing the cassava, it is all rotten.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn. This picture is very telling, actually. The people say usually that a picture is worthy 1,000 words. I think Evelyn has explained this, but to just know that you know, the conditions without water, actually life becomes almost unbearable. Also, what we wanted to emphasize using this slide is to show that young girls like this may end up not, you know, having the kind of life of a dream that they could have if they had education, simply because they are exposed to conditions that are unacceptable to some degree, to some extent. Many of them in the villages around the mining site get impregnated, and they become mothers at the age of 16, 17. And it means that they are stuck with, you know, that kind of life for good and forever. What CARF has been doing, we are now collecting some feedback from a report actually that we wrote about the alert mean. And alert mean is basically receiving all the witnesses, you know, the narratives, the experiences of these communities living around the mining sites in terms of abuses of the community, of individuals, of the environment by those who are exploiting the minerals. And we want to see how we can begin to create a community of narratives of for further advocacy, you know, work. But in here, as you can see, it is not in the picture. CARF has been able at least to have a borehole to kind of provide clean water to the communities living around here instead of that polluted water that you can see there. But we are still even worried, even when we do some research, can we claim really that the water, because it's coming from underground, is not affected by the pollution of all the, you know, the metals that are sinking, you know, all the waters that is, you know, going into the Napa Aquifer in terms of that. So it is our hope that we can continue to educate the communities, but also to engage the multinational companies as well as the government leaders, so that we can come together and begin to think ahead and craft solutions that will be really encompassing and respecting of human rights and environmental rights and the welfare of all.
And we're not so much, I think here what we wanted to show that the phones we carry, the computers we carry, they are reinforcing all this extraction and degradation and dehumanization. And by saying this, we don't mean that the minerals should remain in the ground, but we are asserting for just mining. And finally, in order to understand all these politics and the complexities, we have to look at the general picture of what is happening in Congo. Here, we want to end with this slide. So we have children here mining at this edge. Down here, we have children pounding, because copper and cobalt, most of the time they're entangled, so they pound them to separate. Over here, we have children recruited as child soldiers, especially in Eastern Congo. And over here, we have the refugee camps. People have been displaced since 1999. And here, because you might not be able to see it, sorry, We have UN peacekeeping that has been in Congo since 1999. And the question we ask when all this is going on is that who is really benefiting from this situation and how can we transform it?
Thank you, Evelyn. More than 10 million people have died either as a direct consequence or result of the wars in Eastern Congo or indirect consequences of the mining. And recently, I am sure those who have been following the news, you saw that the European Union signed an MOU with Rwanda to continue getting their supply from natural resources from Rwanda, which every researcher knows does not have enough resources. It means the resources are getting plundered in Eastern Congo, where wars have become actually a way of veiling or smoke screen the reality of what is going on. It is really, really unfortunate that those in the West, especially the European Union, those in the US, those in Canada, who are supposed to be promoting and fostering the human rights, the protection of the environment, peace, actually, as Evelyn was talking about, the just mining, okay? Those are the ones actually who have been funding behind closed doors the many wars that we do have in the Congo. Reports are showing that the M23 group in Eastern Congo is fully funded by the Rwandan government. The Rwandan government that has been receiving weapons from UK, from the US, and sometimes it is really appalling as we keep wondering and why this political hypocrisy of the international community. As Evelyn was ending, she said the UN has been present on the Congolese soil for the past 25 years. In 25 years, you can ask yourselves, what has been the progress made in terms of establishing peace? Instead, many Congolese believe the UN has been also involved in smuggling out minerals or supplying weapons to those rebels in remote places. Otherwise, you got to explain to the Congolese people, communities, how else are these people receiving their weapons when they're enclaved within remote and hinterlands, remote places and hinterlands. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Good.
To both Dr. Evelyn and Dr. and Father Toussaint, just this last point that you mentioned, if people want to know the role that we play, including from Canada, because as you know, Canada is one of the key centers of mining for mining companies, and there are Canadian mining companies operating in Congo and DRC. And there will be in the chat, you will see a link to to the Canadian Network for Corporate Responsibility, which CGI is a member, which has a campaign for strengthening the role of the Canadian Ombudsman for Responsible Enterprise in order that they have the capacity to make Canadian companies accountable so that there is, as both Dr. Evelyn and Dr. Toussaint said, just mining. I want to say that, what we've just heard about Congo is only an example that the issue of resource extraction is problematic in many parts of the world. And it's for that reason that we have invited Yolanda Gonzalez to join us, just to for a few words to show us that, in fact, this is a reality that is present in many different parts of the world. Yolanda is joining us from Honduras. She works with ERIC Radio Progreso, which is a Jesuit human rights center and radio, which we at CGI are very proud to support. And it's a group that accompanies Honduran community organizations through research, broadcast communications, training, and advocacy in land rights, social justice, and human rights. And Yolanda is also a friend who might admire very much, and she will give a very short response highlighting a Latin American perspective on mining and its intersection with women's rights. Yolanda, welcome.
Thanks so much, Jenny and colleagues, for inviting me to participate in this excellent panel and conversation. Well, as I was listening, the first idea that came into my mind is to underscore the global aspect of this issue. I live 7.5 thousand miles away from Congo, and I find so many similarities. Yes, I have to say, I felt so identified with the words regarding we have beauty and resilience as well. We don't have only conflicts. We have very young population with potential and talent, and we laugh, we dance, and we work, and we smile. But I think both regions suffer what we call, or some people call, the curse of plenty, or the curse of the wealth of nature resources. The abundance of natural resources in our countries has resulted in wealth for foreign investors and a few local families, but for ordinary people, mining has almost never meant anything more than poverty and conflicts. As we confirmed in several researches and reports, for example, one we published some years ago in collaboration with the Jesuits Conference of Canada and United States, about the socio-environmental impact of mining, the environmental destruction caused by mining permeates all areas of Honduran life, including water pollution, national drought and food security, education, and physical security. And all of these areas particularly affect women due to gender roles. I'll give you a few brief facts about Honduras, which illustrates the reality of Latin America. We are a small country with a surface area of 112,000 square kilometers and 10 million people. A recent report states that 366 mining concessions have been granted. 165 of them are located in the territories of indigenous peoples. Minerals extracted in Honduras and exported to international markets include gold, silver, copper, zinc, lead, iron oxide, as well as antimony. And the main export destinations up to now are the United States, Germany, Australia, Belgium, South Korea, and Vietnam. I will illustrate with 4 examples the intersection of mining and women and girls' rights from our experience accompanying communities, as Jenny explained. Firstly, and my colleagues explain it as well, the impact of the mining industry on the water contamination. The most affected by this are girls and women, particularly in indigenous areas, as they are the ones who use water the most for domestic activities, and they are the ones who cultivate the land to have food for family consumption and take care of the animals, 2 activities that suffer the most from the impact of water pollution. Several of the cases and the territories that we accompany show the impact of mining on the water contamination, but I would like to focus on one of them, the Azacualpa case, a gold mine on indigenous lands owned by a company that is currently a kind of subsidiary of Aura Minerals, a Canadian company dedicated to mining in several countries around the world. We will publish soon journalistic research on the patterns of its illegal activity and the socio-environmental impact, but it's already documented that some 60,000 people have been affected by water pollution produced by this mining. Communities counted at least 7 pills of cyanide solution in 1 year. Secondly, the environment of insecurity created in the communities by illegal mining industries has led girls and women to lock themselves in their homes and abandoned public spaces, including schools, seriously affecting the right to education, among others. In one case that we accompanied and documented of an illegal iron oxide mining project, for long periods of time, there was a de facto state of siege, which brought about severe consequences as the suspension of school for several months. The school was closed for several months, almost a year. Thirdly, the strategy of criminalizing threats and assassinations of environmental defenders by some mining companies has a direct and indirect impact on women and girls. Another case that we accompanied, the Wapinol case, an iron oxide extractive mega project with Honduras capital, with connections with the capital from the US, has resulted in the criminalization of 22 leaders and defenders, several of whom have been unjustly imprisoned for more than 2 years, and up to 10 murders. The role of women leading the defense of the territory has been highlighted and strengthened in these situations, while still maintaining their domestic duties. Women are exposed to greater risks and burdens when they are activists, especially in a country like Honduras, which, according to the Global Witness report, is the 4th country on the planet for the murder of defenders of land and environment, and the 1st in murders per capita. And finally, just to be short, in these cases, in all these cases mentioned above, the impact of extractive projects on displacement and forced migration has been clear. Sometimes we see communities directly displaced by the project, as in Azacualpa. Another situation is that of leaders and activists opposing mining projects whose lives are at risk and who must flee the country to be safe. In this last case, just in these weeks, we have accompanied 42 people who opposed the project in an asylum process that has been granted finally. But more generally, the negative impact of the economy and insecurity forces more and more women and children to flee their homes and take the very dangerous route to seek for protection in another region or in another country. Thank you.
So I'm going to invite Peter Niemeyer, my colleague, to select a couple of questions. If all of our panelists can turn on their cameras. And Peter, in a moment, you'll ask the first question. And then if we have a chance, we might take a question in the room. We will go a little bit over if our panelists will allow. If anyone in the room needs to leave to go to class, we understand. If anyone needs to check out of the online, we understand as well. But let's get started, Peter, with the first question.
Okay, the first question that we have is from Michael Swan. He's referring to the doctrine of discovery, and his question is that very few Canadians know this history. Would it be helpful if people understood how the doctrine of discovery shaped the map of Africa?
Oh, that question is for Canadians and for the whole world, actually. But there is a lot that we do not know. And for example, in addition to that doctrine, how many Canadians have read this book? 300 years of extraction in Africa. And as we mentioned, also Canada, when you look at the Toronto Stock Exchange, many mining companies, even if they have shares in China, but their biggest shares are here at home in Canada. And so there is a responsibility. Of course, we can talk about the doctrine, teach it in the schools as a history, a foundation to what is going on today. Very, very important. But merging that history, distraction, and the present and the future.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Evelyn. Any of the other panelists want to address that question before we jump on to another?
Well, I could say a few words. I think, I don't know if I get the question properly, but I think, every action that we undertake, whether locally or globally, has to have some level of ideological support, the way we just framed the issue. If you guys have a doctrine of discovery, I think actually I would link it even to the, let's say the 18th century, 17th, 18th century theories of appropriation, in which, the West just, granted itself the right to go anywhere and occupy any land that they would call vacant. Almost, forgetting that in other parts of the world, in other ways of organizing societies and forms of polity, you don't have such a thing like vacant lands. Every land is attached to the people who live around and who live on it, actually, because the interaction, the relationship that many people in Africa, for instance, would have with land is not something to be owned as private property, but it is something to be owned as a collective because of the whole understanding and approach to life, basically.
The next question comes from John Civilon. Isn't it true that the main country involved in extraction of minerals from the DRC is China? And if this is true, how do you create pressure on China to follow ethical forms of extraction?
Yeah, it is true that China has come to occupy the space more and more lately. And China's approach and politics has been very sneaky, knowing that Africa has had a lot of, interaction with the West, with some conditionalities. Many African countries, including the Congo at some point, started losing faith in Western deals and so on and so forth, because it was a plain continuation of colonization. So when China came in with a lot of money and no conditionalities whatsoever, and when China comes in and offered really to say minerals for infrastructure, many of the government in Africa, including the Congolese government, got lured. They got just enticed into that. I want to say here, for instance, that 7 days ago on March 7th, the Congolese government was signing for the 5th time a codicil, which is like an improvement on the contract that they signed back in 2008. And this time around, the improvement is saying China will bring in, instead of 3.2 billion US dollars, it is going to increase the capital, the money for infrastructure to 7 billion, with some 700 million already to be disbursed by next month in kind of emergency, disbursement. So all of this kind of approach gave China, I would say, clout and leeway to say they can really, get to exploit the minerals. But more and more, as I said before, you do have also multinationals from all over the world, Switzerland, Canada, Ivanhoe from Canada, Ivanhoe Mines. We have Glencore, of course. We have, even Indians and Lebanese, and so almost everybody is coming to try to get minerals from the Congo, not only China. And this should be clear. Maybe you have been watching in the news that the Congolese people or party at some point went to court against Apple, against Tesla, against Google, against all these, giant high-tech industries, to say every mineral you're using is abusing our children here. Of course, we lost the case. But it is part of the conversation that we could be having to mention that everybody is in the Congo, not only China.
And just to add something, I think we need also this global thinking, because, for example, in Canada, to get an AAV, it takes like 6 months, because they say we are still waiting for batteries from China. Which means that supply chain is kind of intricate, but there's that level of interdependency. that even if we are looking at China going in Congo to get cobalt and whatever, many developing countries are getting batteries, iPhones and whatever, made from China. I think that's where we are all culpable.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Evelyn. There's a question from John Seeley. Thanks to all for excellent presentations. Question to Father Toussaint and Yolanda. Both of you have been such important partners, or have been such important partners in Jesuit-led shareholder actions calling for development of human rights policies. So, for example, OM Group in the DRC and Aura in Honduras. Understandably, this is just one small tool in the struggle for justice, but I would look forward to your reflections on this strategy going forward. Peace and thanks for your amazing work and witness. John Seeley. All right, so this will be an opportunity for Yolanda and for Father Toussaint. Okay, I'll give it to Yolanda to go first.
Oh, thanks. Such a nice to see you here, John. Of course, I mean, for us, you have been one of the allies, more important alliance in this with this case. Actually, we are just waiting to finish this periodistic research because we have new findings on that. So when we finish, our plan is to go to you and to Maryland and to Jesuit Canada International to share the results and the findings, and just to talk what we can do with that. So perhaps in 1 or 2 months, we will go to you.
Yeah, thank you so very much, John. So good to see you here again. It's been a while indeed. Those were powerful years when we worked together on the OM Group human rights policy back in Chicago. And I think it was an amazing experience for me training, So I would say partly what I'm doing here, really, I connected to the experience and the training that you provided to me as a mentor. And I'm very grateful for that. As Yolanda had just said, it is true that all of this comes in package and in stage or stages. So we are at the basic stage of collecting all the data, analyzing the data, and trying actually to organize the data so that at some point, because advocacy will take everybody, sorry, I have a power shortage. So advocacy would involve all of us. So at some point we will reach out, of course, and I am glad actually it is the Canada Jesuit International that is bringing us together. So all of this which we are doing is already part of, every advocacy commitment that we can be doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Father Toussaint. I am going to turn it over to Jason and to Jenny. Sorry, we've not been able to get to everybody's questions, but I do appreciate many of the comments that have been made. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jenny and Jason at this time.
Jenny,
Thank you.
I'll start and then you can.
Yes.
Wraps up. I will say that there's a lot of good questions and comments there. Our presenters can see them. They will be recorded and shared with our presenters. So all of your questions and comments will be taken into consideration by these three individuals in their work, and we appreciate your feedback and your questions. Also, just finally, the recording will be available within a day or two on the Mauro Institute YouTube channel. It may appear in some of the Jesuit media as well. So there will be recordings you can share with other people. And with that, Jenny, I'll turn it to you to bring us to a close.
Thank you, Jason. And yes, the recording will be available also on our website, CanadianJesuitsInternational.ca. And I know there was, we have some 3 amazing speakers who not only have a lot of knowledge, but it's rooted in their work on the ground with communities. And we could spend a day hearing about this issue. This was just a a taste of it. I know they have a lot to tell us. So please stay in touch with us, because these are the partners that we work with, and we want to support as institutions and as Canadians interested in justice and peace. So I want to thank everyone today. Special thank you to Dr. Evelyn Mayanja and Father Tusanka Barhire and Yolanda Gonzalez from Honduras for joining us and for sharing with us your analysis and experience on this issue. I know you could have used a lot more time. Hopefully we will do more of these in the future. There's obviously a lot of interest on the part of Canadians who want to do the right thing. And it really helps us to know and be aware of the role that we are playing in the world as Canadians. Thank you also to Jason and to the Mauro Institute for this collaboration. And we look forward to doing more of this in the future. And thanks to all the participants and for the excellent questions that everybody asked, and that we hope to respond for the ones that weren't addressed at this time. Thank you. And I wish everyone a wonderful day for the remaining of the day and evening for Father Toussaint. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And there is a short survey that as you leave, please, if you want to give more feedback or other things you'd like to see from CJI and webinars, there's an opportunity to do that. And thank you, Jenny and Peter. Perhaps I'll send a short Zoom for Jenny and Peter. We'll just debrief after.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you for inviting us.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was wonderful to be here. Thank you indeed.